Welcome to the Black Squadron podcast weekly recap of the Acolyte. For tonight, you might notice this is a little different. I'm going to be your host. My name is Todd. Unfortunately, our regular host BP couldn't join us for tonight's episode recap. However, joining me as always, and possibly the one pulling all the strings in the Acolyte, the one and only Darth Mari. Darth Mari, how are you feeling after this latest episode?
I just want this episode on repeat, like in my brain all day long. It's so good. So good. I'm so upset that it ended. I need more. Waiting a week is going to be so awful.
We might have gotten possibly the biggest cliffhanger that we've ever had in a Star Wars with episode 4. I can't wait to dive into this. I know there was a lot of good. As soon as that ending rolled, I knew you were going to be like, this is going to be like a 20 out of 10, a 40 out of 10 on your scale for this week. But we're going to dive into everything. So like you said, this is our weekly episode recap. We do this after every episode. Really excited to dive into this. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Episode 4 is titled Day. Again, we're not getting the dual naming that we saw in the first 2 episodes. Episode 3 didn't have that. Episode 4 is titled Day. It was directed by Alex Garcia Lopez, who is also directing episode 5. So I have a theory about this, and I've seen this floating around. I think they are going to continue to do the dual naming for the episodes, but I think it's going to be individual episodes. So I think that Alex Garcia Lopez did episode 4 is Day. I think episode 5 might be Night.
Ooh, yeah. That would be fitting. The sun's literally setting at the end of this episode. So
you've got the light side, the Jedi, everything in this episode. And now we're going to flip the script, get right into the dark and the evil with Night, which also means that we might get some other naming for the other episode 3 was the other one that didn't have kind of a parallel title to accompany it. So I could see, I think Kaganata is doing episode 7, I believe. So we might see sort of the other side of that flashback scene that we saw in episode 3 in that episode, and we could see the other title. So I'll be curious to see. We'll have to see if that plays out. But first word that comes to your mind when you think of this episode?
Oh, just one word? You just
or 20 words or 30 words, whatever. What comes to mind when you first think of this episode?
After my third watch through, my first, I shouted, "Don't F with the Sith."
In case those listening or watching can't tell, Mari is a massive fan of the Sith. So like I said, I knew you were going to love this episode. I knew that it was going to be, just a little bit of what you wanted. And I'm sure episode 5 might be the best thing ever for Star Wars for you.
I might have to take Wednesday off next week.
Just to emotionally recover.
Exactly.
I think for me, the first word that I thought of after this episode is horror. And I think it's because this proved that they could do some kind of horror themed Star Wars just with and we'll talk about it a little later, the entrance of the Master at the end of this episode. I mean, just chills down my spine.
Oh yeah. I sat up. Yeah.
It was so good, and just the power you felt like. I felt like the whole environment, the whole atmosphere, just you could feel it change in a second, and I was, so good, so good. But before we get to that ending, a lot of stuff happened in this episode, so we'll go ahead and kind of roll through some of this. So the episode starts with Kelnaka on Kofar. We go inside his hut. One thing I noticed watching this again is that there was a lot of the symbols from the Witch Coven throughout his hut, which I kind of thought was interesting.
Did you notice the yin and yang?
I was going to say at the end, I noticed that at the very end of the episode. So it's interesting because obviously
it's wet. Like in the first, when they first show like one of the walls in his like hut, it's there. So like it's one of the first symbols you see, and then they progress to the spiral. So it was just interesting that they used the yin and yang at first. I'm curious to see how far they go into that.
I think it's super cool. I'm very interested to see if there's more that we find out about kind of all of these symbols on his walls, because obviously Torben killed himself in episode 2, and he was basically atoning for what he thought he did wrong. So I wonder if this kind of plays into that aspect and what we haven't quite seen yet with the Jedi, and the more to that flashback sequence than maybe we've seen so far. So I'd really be curious to see if we get kind of a call back as to why those symbols were on those walls.
Yeah.
A lot of jumping back and forth between both points of views, both May and Osha in this episode. But we go back to Coruscant right after Kofar. You see Jackie training, and then her basically kind of having an interaction with Osha. Osha's getting ready to leave, go back. She's like, I've done my job. I helped the Jedi find May. I'm getting out of here. I'm done. I don't want this anymore. I don't want this burden. Get me away from here. I love the relationship we're getting between Osha and Jackie, not just in this scene, but throughout this episode.
There was a lot of Jackie and Osha throughout all of the different scenes. Their relationship is really adorable. I feel like I did have an issue with some of the writing for it. It just felt very, or maybe it was just line delivery. It felt very staccato, like it wasn't like natural, and it was missing something for me. So I was kind of bummed. I love the idea of them having like this adorable friendship, but the dialogue sometimes got lost for me.
Did you feel like it was just a little too forced in some scenarios rather than sort of naturally? That's fair. Hey, Star Wars is known for forced dialogue, so maybe they're just leaning into it. I will say, as much as it might be problematic at times, I do love the way that Jackie delivers and Daphne King delivers some of her lines, because they're so like sarcastic at times, especially anything with Yord.
Yeah.
We can talk about it a little bit, but the whole like briefing sequence.
Oh my
when they're like,
gosh.
Yord's like, do you have something to add? And they're like, great job, Yord. You're doing fantastic.
Very comprehensive briefing.
Exactly. Like I said, we do a lot of cuts in this episode. So we cut to Chimere and May landing on Kofar. And it's interesting because obviously this is the first episode post May finding out that Osha is alive, and vice versa for Osha. Seeing the cracks in May start to form, sort of doubting what she's doing, doubting her mission, but then also at the same time, Chimere really pushing her like, hey, remember you made this agreement, you signed on the dotted line of this deal. So that I think was really interesting to see at the very beginning of this episode and then play out throughout the rest of this episode. What were your thoughts on sort of that early dynamic in this episode?
Well, you don't really see like a lot of the cracks on that first like landing. You see her like determined to go. It's what seems like kill Kilnaka. Mm-hmm. But then later on you see she's decided something completely different. But it made me wonder, what's this deal? Like, why is the deal just that she has to kill them and then the master will train her more? Or like, what is she getting out of this deal? And why is it these 4 Jedi that he's requiring that she kill?
I almost wonder if it's sort of like a blood oath kind of thing, where it's not necessarily that she wants to be trained as a Sith or trained in the ways of the dark side, but more she wants revenge for what happened to, obviously, like I said, the stuff we didn't see in the flashback. She wants revenge for whatever she feels like from her point of view was done that destroyed her family.
Right.
So I almost wonder if it's kind of like a scratch my back, I scratch yours. You go kill these Jedi and do this for me, and I'll do something for you in return. Or, I'd be curious to see if there's more to that.
Yeah, I was just like, if that were the case, like, why wouldn't he just go kill them and then have her take care of something else?
We can talk about this a little later. I have a possible theory about that, but we'll get into it. So we come back to Coruscant. Like I said, lots of jumping back and forth between the 2 points of view. Come back to Coruscant with the Jedi discussing sort of this problem that they have with May, this issue of May successfully killing these high-ranking skilled Jedi masters, and sort of how to handle it. Have to say, I saw this character pop up and I was like, I don't want to get too excited. And then I saw the credits and I saw it was confirmed in the credits. So I was ready to go. But the man, the myth, the legend, Ki-Adi-Mundi is back in all his glory. The memes have been glorious. The amount of ones that I've seen that have been like, what about the Sith attack on the Wookiee instead of the droid attack on the Wookiees? I love that he was in this. Really cool to see a character like that. That when we see that character in the prequel era is so well regarded and so renowned. He's on the Jedi Hawk Council in his youth and sort of in the thick of it to a degree with the rest of the Jedi. Was really, really cool. I know there's already some controversy over like, how can he be in this when he was really born here? But then that was from a Legends thing. So it's Star Wars people being Star Wars people. And
of course,
go touch some grass.
I had the same kind of feeling where I was like, is that kid? That's not him. Is that him? They didn't. Like, they did.
Well, it's interesting too, because obviously the big thing going into this is in the prequel era and the Phantom Menace, Ki-Adi-Mundi says like the Sith have been extinct for a millennia.
Yeah.
So the fact that he's they took that, they knew that they have to address that, and everyone's like, they're not going to address it. Star Wars jumped through hoops in the Clone Wars to make sure that Anakin and Grievous never met. I think they'll be able to figure out how to handle this one little line in the Phantom Menace. So the fact that they threw him in the thick of it, I'll be really curious to see what that does. Like, what does that look like, and how does he get to where we see him in the Phantom Menace, where he's so confident the Sith, he's like, yeah, no way, the Sith have been gone forever. So what are they?
That's
not a chance.
I'm very curious about it. I wonder if it's just like it ends up being like a classified thing and he maybe never learns of it. And so that's why he's so convinced of it. Or I'm curious to see how they pull that off.
One thing that is interesting is that when they're discussing this issue with May and whoever trained her master, they don't necessarily say that it's a dark side user. It's not a Sith. One Jedi suggests that it might be a splinter cell, which obviously also indicates that they've had issues in the past with force sensitive beings creating these splinter cells and these kind of rogue elements. Master Venestra thinks that it might have been a Jedi that taught her. So I think they're going to use stuff like that to also kind of explain why Ki-Adi-Mundi says what he says in the Phantom Menace. Mm-hmm. But it is interesting. Ki-Adi-Mundi wants to alert the High Council. Master Venestra doesn't want to because she's worried that High Council will then have to inform the Senate, and then the Senate panics and freaks out. So we also get sort of the Jedi playing politics to a degree.
Yeah.
Which I know you talked about in previous episodes, how the Jedi are starting to crumble and starting to fall down into the lower rungs and not quite at the peak that they were. So what were your thoughts on kind of the political elements that we were seeing in this conversation?
It was immediately like in my head, I'm just like, it's not necessarily full-blown corruption, but like they're controlling the narrative on how people see their order. And Venestra pulls it off right here where she's like, nope, we can't tell the High Council because then people will start talking like they won't trust us and all that BS. So it fit exactly into all of the things that I have said before. I was like, oh, there you go, Jedi.
You're like, these dirty Jedi scum are being exactly what I thought they'd be.
Yep. Just earlier on.
You're like, listen, you're like, I've always been on the right side. I've always been in the right. I'm never in the wrong. One thing that I want to talk about is that Venestra, when she's talking to Sol about May, they're obviously talking about, like Sol wants to help bring in May. Venestra's got hesitations because of his relationship in the past with both May and Osha. And basically Venestra won't let him go on the strike team to get May and rescue Kelnaka unless there's something that they can kind of offer to May, which is Osha. But one thing that she says specifically that I really kind of thought was interesting and I want to hear your thoughts on is that she says, I fear she's only a small part in her being May of her master's plan. I feel a shift, something to tip the scales, which again, calling back to the prequels, the idea of, hard to see the dark side is.
Yeah.
So you're starting to see those early elements, obviously for you, big Sith fan. What were your thoughts seeing that the Jedi are kind of feeling like, hey, something's off, something's not quite right now?
I immediately was like, oh yeah, here comes the dark side. It's not necessarily a full-blown reveal, but the Jedi are gonna start realizing like as we've talked about, like it's the beginning of the end of the Jedi, because they can't accept that it's there. And so I feel like Vanestra probably, I don't know how like her life progresses. I don't know when she like passes or whatever. So I don't know if maybe she actually figured this out in this episode, and then no one, either she's gone before anyone can really hold on to that, or what happens. But I was immediately like, that something has to happen to stop it from escalating further, but there is the sense that it's there.
I almost wonder, and I never thought about it, but maybe Vanestra is kind of the one that is the keeper of this knowledge.
Yeah.
And then when she passes, it's gone. Like the
Exactly.
idea that the dark side is here, which also Yoda's kind of kicking around right now. So what's Homeboy up to? If there's some absolute craziness going on in the galaxy, and Yoda's like, oh yeah, that's cool, it's fine, everything's good. Come back to Chimera and May talking about the test of having to kill a Jedi unarmed. They're convinced, Chimera's like, it's got to be some kind of test, right? Like there's no way if you take the Jedi's weapon, is that considered cheating? So kind of really talking about the specific, they've been focusing a lot on this killing a Jedi unarmed element and sort of the power behind that. And then May kind of starts to ask Chimera sort of what's his relationship to this master, what deal did he make? Chimera's like, oh, I just kind of owe him. And then he says specifically, how he is, he collects people. Yeah. What did you think of that line specifically?
There's so much that he does that makes me think that he is our baddie. Like he kind of stumbles over like, oh no, I didn't make a deal with him. Like I owe him. Like, so there's like little things that just make me think that he is Smiley.
He's just a good friend from back in the day. It's all cool. Like
we're buddies.
I scratch his back, he scratches my back. It's all we're just besties. Just a couple of dark side besties.
Totally normal.
It is interesting how quickly he changed the subject, May. As soon as he's like, oh yeah, like how he is. He just collects people. Oh, by the way, here's the border. Why don't we keep on going? Actually, why don't we start running? Let's get this going. So Chimera is interesting because I feel like people are very much split on he's either Darth Joker or he is like a red herring, and that's what they want us all to think. So I have a hope that we'll find out either next week or sometime soon what Chimera's role is in all of this, because speculating is great. I love the weekly speculation. I might go crazy if it's who is this dark side user, and it's just like a picture of Chimera like every other day. Like maybe, possibly. We cut back to Coruscant. You see a conversation as Osha's getting ready to leave between Sol. Sol is asking Osha if she'll help bring in May. One thing that was interesting is that when Sol is asking Osha to help with this mission, Osha's immediately like, oh, you want me to rejoin the Jedi? And she got like excited. And it's almost, so I wonder if there's more to that, like more to her leaving the Jedi Order, because Indara pushed for her to be removed from the Jedi Order. But yeah, just how excited she was. And Sol's like, actually, not really, sort of, kind of, maybe, no.
No, you're along for the ride. I'm using you, really, is the whole thing.
Yeah, it's like I got some baggage from my past that I gotta take care of, and you gotta help me fix that. Like, come on in. You're not a Jedi, but you get to wear these fun civilian robes. It's all good.
As soon as she said, I'm not wearing those civilian robes, so I was like, she's gonna be in the civilian robes. Like
I love, especially with Ahsoka being a civilian in season 7 of the Clone Wars. Like I love anytime we hear civilian, it just makes me think of that. One thing that was at the end of this conversation between Sol and Osha that I thought was really interesting is that Sol says that there's still good in her, referring to May. Love this. That's a callback that goes to so many different elements of Star Wars. It's in there's still good in him. I feel it from Luke about Vader. Just sort of this theme of the power of love over evil. Love that.
To Obi-Wan, like
exactly.
That's immediately what I thought of when I heard him say that. I was like, Padme.
It's interesting sort of where like what that line where people go. Obviously for you it was Padme, for me it was Luke. So I'll be curious to see in the fandom, if you're listening, watching, let us know what you thought when you heard that. Did you think of Luke? Did you think of Padme? What was your first thought hearing that line? We get the Jedi Strike team after Osha's like, okay, I'll help Soul. We get the Jedi Strike team on their way to Kofar. Briefing by Yord. Yord can do no wrong.
He can. He's the worst.
I will live and die by the Yord Horde.
I'm sorry.
So we get this briefing by Yord. They're talking about it. Basil, they have a tracker. Interesting. BP talked about this in our Discord, that the Jedi have to use a tracker to find Kelnaka when they're force sensitive, and you can use the force to sense other force sensitive beings. Like, interesting about that.
I know that planets in the past, like if they are strong in the force, have made it a little bit more difficult for Jedi or force users to use their senses. So I wonder if maybe there was something in that and they just forgot to say something about it, or I like to give them the benefit of the doubt on that one.
My thought is maybe Kelnaka, because he's been missing for basically a year at this point. Like, they send him to Kofar and then just no one heard from him for a year. So I wonder, sort of like how Obi-Wan cut himself off from the Force in the Kenobi series, I wonder if Kelnaka started to sort of like spiral, kind of come apart. Maybe that's explaining why we have all those symbols on the walls in his hut, and then cut himself off from the Force. Like, it was almost too much for him. So it's like, I'm going quiet. I'm going to go live the hermit life.
Yeah.
So that might be why they have Basil. I love Basil. Basil can do no wrong.
So
Yord might be doing some wrong. I might give you that. Basil can do no wrong. Basil is love. Basil is life.
That part where she falls over and he starts yelling and her face, like, oh my God, I died.
And then there's one more Jedi that I think everybody thought that this was. You thought it was. I thought it was. The Star Wars Twitter account confirmed it's not. I'm pretty sure.
What?
It's not Plo Koon.
How is it not Plo Koon?
Listen, don't shoot the messenger, but I saw that the Star Wars Twitter account commented on someone being like, is that who I think it was? And then the Star Wars account said it's actually, and has, I can't remember the name of the actual Jedi. So no Plo Koon.
That's some BS. I'm upset about this.
So
Star Wars is wrong.
We got Ki-Adi Mundi, but we're not getting Plo Koon, sadly.
Fine.
They land on Kofar. We have sort of the Jedi journeying across Kofar. Osha and Yord are having a conversation about basically if Osha talking to May doesn't fix anything, she wants Yord to be like, hey, you gotta take her out. I can't do it. You gotta do it. Like, I'm putting the pressure on you. This is I'm not gonna be able to handle this. This is all on you.
Thanks.
Carry my burdens for me. But as a result of that, the idea that Osha is going to have to face her past with May starts to come up a little bit more, and that gets brought up again later on in this episode. So interesting that the aspect of facing your past is becoming more and more present as this series goes on. We saw it a little bit with Torben in the first episode, even with Indara a little bit, like when she realizes it's May, she's like, you, before she dies. So having to face your past, I think, is going to constantly be something that comes up and gets pushed, especially as we get into the later episodes. Creepy bug scene.
I hate this scene.
I don't like bugs, so this was not the scene for me.
I don't mind bugs. I just found this scene absolutely pointless in a 30-minute episode. All right.
I think it's going to have a point, but I think it's going to be in the second half because, again, these bugs, there's an aspect of it too, because it's a little later on, but Osha reaching out with the Force to feel this creature, and this creature having a response to her that's evil was also kind of interesting. Like, she reached out with the Force, and the first instinct of this creature was to attack her.
Well, so Basil did say it was a rot. So
maybe. The reason why I think that this was important is because, again, this episode's day. If the next episode is night and they're in the forest and they're running through the forest and these bugs are attracted to lightsabers, these things are going to be everywhere.
It's a good point. It is.
So
It just
I think it's
felt. Ugh.
that's fair. I think it's a little bit of foreshadowing for something to come, and that's why this is in this episode. I don't like
Making
bugs.
making the point of this is a binging show like through and through, because like you have to wait until next week to
Yeah.
find out if this scene actually has any bearing. Like,
Yeah. Well, I almost feel like this episode was one episode that they cut in half.
yeah.
Which obviously the cut scene kind of, or the cliffhanger adds
Yeah.
to that. So another reason why this scene kind of might be important is that you have this conversation between Osha and Jackie afterwards, talking about the Force, and it's kind of an honor to see something become one with the Force. And then Jackie says, "We're not defined by what we lose; we're defined by what we survive." I think that's a great line. Like that might be one of the top Star Wars quotes that we've seen in a long time, if not completely, because I think there's so much. Immediately when I see this line too, I think of Obi-Wan Kenobi. You think about everything that Obi-Wan's lost. He lost his master. He lost Satine. He lost Anakin. He's lost so much.
So much.
And it's shaped him into who he is. So I think that you could take that and apply it to so many Star Wars characters, even Luke to a degree.
Yeah.
Love it. Great line. We get one last cut to May and Chimere. They're talking about this test to kill a Jedi unarmed. May's like, no, it's impossible. There's no way. You can really start to see the cracks and the gears turning in her brain. Like, why am I doing it? Like, what's the point of this? This is stupid. There's no reason why I should be doing this. Chimere is very adamant that she's sticks to it. He's like, no, it's possible.
You have to figure it out. Like,
you can do this. Like A plus B equals C. Like it's all right there for you. And then he runs off to find more water.
Yeah.
It's not, again, this is very much, I think, why people are either like Chimere's the master or he's the red herring, because he does a lot of shady stuff throughout this episode.
Yeah.
And this kind of is the tip of it.
Absolutely.
May then tricks Chimere, basically makes it seem like she's in trouble. He runs out. She captures him, tells her she's had enough of her deal with the master. She's going to turn herself in to kill Naka and tell the Jedi everything. And then that's the last we see of Chimere for the rest of the episode.
But you saw his face change. Mm-hmm. He was like, he'll kill you. Like, there was, oh my gosh. I was like, yeah, he is either the big bad or he is a red herring. Like,
yeah. He's been such an interesting character because he hasn't been used a whole lot. Like he's in a little bit of episode 2, and then he's obviously in this episode, but he's split in time with the Osha side of the story. So he hasn't been in a lot, but every time he's on screen, there's a lot of like little things he does, little moments, little conversations, even body language. You're like, there's something else here. Soul, as they're walking through, clearly seems like something's off. Maybe he's starting to feel there's a dark presence nearby, but he won't acknowledge it. Osha's like, hey, what's going on? And he's like, it's nothing. It's fine. Everything's great.
Yeah.
Another great quote from this episode that he says is that you're not going to face her. Again, her referring to May as he's talking to Osha. You're going to face your past. We both are.
Yeah.
Once we get May on the ship, I'll explain everything. So again, there's a lot that we are not being told right now. We've seen a lot of stuff from one side. I'm really like, the more they hint at this, the more I really want to know what happened, what really happened. What did the Jedi do that was so bad? What, again, hearing this, what were your thoughts?
My immediate thoughts were, this is going to upset people. When he said when we safely get May on the ship, I was like, one of these guys is dying. May or Soul are dying. And like, it would go, what?
I was going to say, someone's not making it off this party.
And then like, as the scenes progress, like you see, it's about to get real. But like when he said that, I was like, that's always foreshadowing that someone is not safely making it to this ship for this conversation to happen. Like, I mean, they could totally surprise me and follow through with this line, but it's rarely happened in the past.
It's like one
So
of those, like, I'll tell you when you're older, and then the person gets like blown up like 5 minutes later kind of
yep,
thing.
exactly. Yeah. So like I hope that they don't kill him off and like we do get that explanation finally about what really happened because this makes you think that they are I mean, there's been so many things to say that they're hiding something, but Soul has never given that a real indication of it, and this is kind of the first time you get that from him.
Well, and you also get this feeling that he's scared.
Yes,
I
yeah,
think for the first time, like you can tell that he's something is genuinely like he is on edge. Something is not
yeah,
right, and he is very. I think he's done just such a good job of projecting that in the way that this character has been done.
yeah,
Huge fan of Soul. Again,
yeah,
Soul can do no wrong, but I'm sure
yeah.
Soul's going to do all the wrong, and I'll still be sitting there like he's a
We
good
love
guy.
you.
We love Soul. Soul patrol for
Marry
life.
me, Soul.
Speaking of killed, Master Kelnaka killed off screen by assuming the master. Like I would be shocked if it's not the master. If it's
Right,
like
who
just
could have
kidding,
been?
another distracting.
Yeah.
Has a giant like lightsaber cut across his chest. One thing that I thought was interesting, and I'm curious to see if you kind of feel the same way or what your thoughts are on this. He was killed in his chair with no real evidence that he put up a fight. Like it looked like he was caught off guard.
Yeah.
I almost wonder if he knew the
If
killer,
somebody was coming.
or that he knew the
Oh.
killer. The fact that he
Ooh.
there's no evidence of a struggle, because clearly if it was something that like he knew that this person was there to kill him, he might have put up a fight, unless he took the Torben way and was like, just take me out kind of thing,
Right.
take me out for my past issues. But I do wonder if he recognized or knew who eventually
That's
did kill
a
him.
really good question. Oh my gosh, that'd be wild.
Just another layer to this onion,
Oh.
another wrinkle to this story. Just because the way they built Kelnaka up is this big, strong,
Yeah.
powerful Wookiee Jedi, and then he gets taken out off screen, kind of in a lame-ish way. Like no fight, no crazy battle. I think everybody was expecting. I know BP, I think, was a little bummed that there was no fight, or we didn't get to see the power of a Wookiee Jedi. Yeah, I'd be curious to see though if he knew or recognized who eventually took him out.
Did you know as soon as she like stepped in and was like Master Kalanaka and they panned the camera over to him?
I had a feeling, especially once they pan the camera and it's just you see this like Wookiee sitting in the chair. I was like, oh, he's toast. He's done.
As soon as I noticed he wasn't moving, I was like, I even said
It's like,
out loud, I was like, he's dead.
he's not making it to the next episode. Yeah, it's again, I think there's just so many layers to this show. They're really starting to get into the murder horror mystery aspect of it too. I love it. Love it. Sorry, BP, that they killed your boy off screen and you didn't get to see your Wookiee fights. And then we get to probably one of the coolest entrances in Star Wars for a dark side character. I think the only one that beats this really is Darth Maul. But I love how the Sith are all about their dramatic entrances. But we get the Jedi all kind of feeling something is up as they're approaching Kelnaka's hut. They call out to Master Kelnaka. May's inside. She feels it, especially after she sees that Kelnaka's been killed. And then we get the appearance of the Master floating down.
Oh my God.
And you could, I mean, just again, the chills that I got, like that spine tingling feeling of watching this ominous character float down and slowly walk towards Osha. Horror movie vibes.
Without a doubt, this creepy cloaked figure just appears out of literally thin air and is floating down behind her. Like, that is the most horror entrance we've ever had for anyone in Star Wars. Like, it's so beautifully done. I sat like straight up. I put my legs underneath me, like I was so hyped up. I was like, oh, here we go. Yeah.
It's a great entrance. The way that the Master approaches Osha, this I thought was interesting. And this, again, wild speculation. might add a little bit more weight to the Chimera argument is, remember when in episode 2 when Osha is impersonating May and Chimera gets really close and
Right up to
whispers,
her.
"You're just like her," kind of thing.
Yeah.
You get that same feeling
Yeah.
with the master walking closer and closer, and the body language is very similar. So either, again, massive red herring and we're all completely wrong, or great just callbacks to earlier episodes and sort of laying those breadcrumbs for us to pick up.
Yeah.
So cool.
Ugh.
Yeets Osha completely out of the way. First
Just
off, the fact that Soul let the master get that close to Osha, and he's like,
right.
maybe, because not only do we get like the cool body language, the leaning in, then you get just the lightsaber ignition and the raising up. Beautiful shot, fantastic looking shot, and then just yeets Osha as the
Just
Jedi
with
are
a
like,
flick of his fingers. It wasn't even his hand, it was fingers. Like he's like, yeah, worm, like you're out of here.
so cool. I do think that we are going to see just the power of the dark side kind of on full display, especially next episode. I'm hoping next episode, because we've seen some pretty crazy stuff with the dark side, but I would love to see them just go wild with like the super strong, over the top dark side character.
We've never gotten like someone just full on like dark side power, like going ham. Like we see it in some ways, and we see it in like the lightning and all that kind of stuff, but the dark side has such an immense power, and their wielders have this strength that's just, I mean, that's part of their code. Like there's so much more to it, and I really hope that they do explore it and show us that in the next episode.
We've seen it a little bit with, it's been a more modern thing, I think, probably because of the limitations of when the original trilogy was made. But we've seen it with Vader in the comics, obviously, but also in Rogue One, kind of the same vibe when Vader does the hallway scene in Rogue One. I got with this very short, it's very brief cliffhanger ending to this episode. But just great. Yeets Osha though, and then absolutely like shoves every single Jedi back without even breaking a sweat, just like a little force push.
That whole, when he flicks her and then immediately like his head turns.
Yeah, it does that quick little.
And he's like, no, what do y'all get out of here? Like, oh my gosh, it was so good. That quick head turn. I want that, like, I want that as like a screensaver. Like, oh my God.
So I want to get into a couple things from our Discord. If you're not a member of our Discord, join our Discord. It's great. We have lots of fun. We talk about the Acolyte. We talk about collecting, all kinds of fun stuff. But a couple of people from our Discord have been speculating on who the identity of this master could be. Jeremy and Big John are kind of going back and forth about who the identity of the master could be, but also maybe if there's more to this relationship. And this is sort of what I want to talk to a little bit, that maybe the master is the middle of some kind of Sith dynamic, similar to what we had with Palpatine, Dooku, and Ventress, or Palpatine, Vader, and Starkiller in the expanded universe. So maybe this master, this Darth Joker character is that Dooku in that equation, the Vader in that equation, and then has an apprentice below them, and then has a master above them. It's very on brand for the Sith. Would be very interested to see how that, if that's true, if that plays out. Tatooine is convinced that Mother Coral is the Darth Joker, the big bad of this series. Not a bad suggestion, not a bad argument. We don't see her. We don't see her in the pile of bodies from the fire, the destruction of the Witch Coven. So what I want to talk about is going back to the emphasis of the test, the killing the Jedi unarmed aspect. I'd be curious to see what your thoughts are on this. What if the master is actually the true acolyte? So maybe kind of going back to that 3 relationship, you know, the Dooku Palpatine, or the Palpatine Dooku Ventress relationship. But what if the master is actually the acolyte and is using May and to kill these Jedi to pass that test? So basically, the master's master told the master to kill these 4 Jedi to pass this test, but you have to do it unarmed. The master has not killed any Jedi up till Kelnaka.
Right.
Yeah, potentially. Hasn't been
But he
confirmed.
really only had to kill one of them.
So the Master used May to kill 2 Jedi, Indara and Torben.
Yep.
Without a weapon.
That'd be wild. Oh
Right?
man. The spin that would create.
And it would be very Palpatine vibes.
Mm-hmm.
Like using others, because Palpatine obviously orchestrates the Clone Wars, playing both sides. It's very on brand for the Sith to kind of be in the back, pulling at the puppet strings of everything. So I think this would be a really cool way to set up what Palpatine eventually did. So this probably isn't Palpatine. I don't think any relationship to Palpatine with this stuff, but laying the foundation that then Palpatine takes and expands on to build his empire, kill all the Jedi.
That would be insane. You think like a Sith. You're part of the like. What are you doing?
So maybe I'm actually the Acolyte. Maybe the Acolyte is the friends we've made along the way. The real Acolyte. But again, I want to know, who do you think is the person behind the mask?
I love both the Chimera and Coral thoughts. I lean more towards Chimera. Am I saying his name right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like I've total brain fart right there. Yeah, I really like the thought that it's him. Like, there's so many parallels between the things that he does as himself and this. I mean, from what we've seen and things he said, like it feels like it fits, but I mean, Star Wars will do that to you. They'll make it fit, and then they're like, but here's why it doesn't.
But surprise, it's another character.
Exactly. So I love the idea that it's Chimera. So hoping for that.
Well, again, hopefully we'll see. We got the next episode is, I'm assuming, I would be so mad if they were like, actually, it's another flashback episode. Actually, it's an episode of The Mandalorian.
You're right.
Din Djarin, what are you doing here? But I'm assuming we're going to get the conclusion of this episode next week. But again, great episode. Thoughts overall on this episode? I can tell that it was a pretty high-ranking episode for you. But what were your overall thoughts, just kind of on the episode as a whole? What worked? What didn't work for you?
I mean, yes, I absolutely love this episode. I've watched it 3 times in the last 24 hours, and I want to watch it again. And really, I just want to watch like the second half of the episode. The reveal is just one of the most incredible. Like Darth Maul's reveal, obviously, has always been like my top. It was just replaced with this one, and
really,
hands down, the creepiest, most impressive intro that I've ever seen. Yeah, it left me speechless. Just like, what just happened? Like, but other than that, like the whole bug scene still bothers me, and some of the dialogue it irked me a little bit. But overall, loved this episode. Like literally life-changing for me.
Rating 1 to 10. I have a feeling the 1 to 10 scale is not going to be applicable, but 1 to 10.
That ever 10. What are your thoughts? 20. I want to hear what you think.
From a storytelling perspective, I think that this episode does a great job of setting up a lot of things. For me, it does very much feel like it's part 1 of a 2-part episode. So I don't know if this episode maybe would have worked better if they had just done it as one long episode. So instead of 1 30-minute episode, we have 1 60-minute episode or something like that. Yeah. Obviously, having the cliffhanger is a big, gets everybody talking. And I do think to a degree, the binge watching culture has kind of ruined some of the cliffhangers, and then everybody's spending a week talking about it. I mean, it's so much fun to see all the speculation, even talking with you, the speculation on what is going on, who is this, who's playing at that. I think it's so fun, but it does at the same time feel like this episode maybe might have been a little better if it had been just one single episode rather than kind of abruptly stopped right in the middle, right as things were getting crazy.
They're gonna abruptly cut off 5, and we're all gonna be even more pissed.
Exactly. So that, I mean, again, maybe that would have helped a little bit, but I also kind of like the cliffhanger a lot because it's been fun to speculate and let things marinate and watch it a couple times and see if you pick up different things. Like I didn't notice the yin and yang symbol until my second viewing. So it's fun. It's fun having little things to look for, knowing how the episode goes. So for me, this episode, I really liked it. I would probably put it at like an 8.5 out of 10 for me.
Is that like your highest rated?
I think it's close, maybe a 9, just because of that final like 10 minutes where it's just like so crazy. The final reveal was nuts. I don't think it replaces Darth Maul for me, but that reveal for Darth Joker, the Master, whatever we're calling it, was very cool. And I just love how over dramatic the Sith are. They're like, don't mind me, just floating on down Mary Poppins style. It's Mary Poppins up in here.
I'm Mary Poppins, y'all.
So it's great. I think there's a lot of something for everybody in this episode. You had callbacks to the prequel era, a lot of callbacks to the prequel era. You had lines that called back to other elements of Star Wars. I think this episode just did a really good job of feeling very Star Warsy. And I'd love to hear, obviously BP's not with us tonight, but I would love to hear his thoughts because the previous episode, the flashback episode, he didn't love as much because it didn't have quite that Star Warsy feel to him. It felt just kind of like a sci-fi vibe. So I'd be curious to see if this was the opposite for him. And it felt very much like, oh, this is Star Wars. This is very much Star Wars.
I mean, they had like all the lightsabers, all of them like lighting them up. You see them, a couple of them twirl to get it ready. Like super Star Wars.
Very Star Wars. So I can't wait. Episode 5 can't come soon enough. That's going to do it for us for this discussion of episode 4 of The Acolyte. We'd love to hear from you and your thoughts, what you're excited about with this episode, who you think Darth Joker might be. If you want to continue the conversation with us, you can find us on all social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. If it's out there, you can find it. We'll also have a Discord, like I said. Join our Discord. Lots of fun people, lots of great speculation and theories, conversations, just good time, everybody being positive, having a fun time with Star Wars. If you're enjoying the show, we really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review on whatever you're listening or watching this on. And if you're on YouTube, hit that like button. Greatly appreciate it. Helps us. And we love just getting a nice little pat on the back.
Let us know we're doing a good job, please.
Just smash that like button. Share it with a friend, a partner, someone that you want to talk Star Wars with. We really appreciate it. Darth Mari, where can the fine folks find you?
I am at Frosty Britches with a Z on pretty much everything.
And I am Todd, aka Todd Knows Best. It's like the nose on your face. You can find me on all kinds of social media. I talked about this last time we did one of these episodes, but I have been baking and cooking up every recipe that the Star Wars.com
I wish I lived closer because I wish we could have like an Acolyte eating party, like
Acolyte food parties. I made the spice creams recently for this most recent episode. 10 out of 10. Recommend if you like baking. They're like a gingerbread cookie, but softer. Fantastic. Oh, yeah. But you can find me posting pictures of that on all kinds of things, talking about The Mandalorian. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, every platform known to man. If you want to catch our regular podcast, you can find us on all podcasting platforms every other Wednesday. And then you can find our weekly Acolyte coverage every Thursday. And that's going to be going on until the series is done for this season. We just put out a brand new episode of our regular podcast this past Wednesday, diving into Revenge of the Sith as we get closer to the 20th anniversary next year, wrapping up our prequel era coverage that we've been doing since this is the 25th anniversary of The Phantom Menace. Check it out. It's a great time. It's a fun time walk down memory lane for a lot of people with regards to Revenge of the Sith. And until next time, remember, the Force will be with you always.